Hi, my name is Tianyu Shea. I'm a third-year medical student at the New York Institute of Technology, and you're listening to Do or Do Not. Welcome to our 8th episode. Today we have Dr. Colleen McCally. Dr. McCally graduated from the New York Institute of Technology College of Osteopathic Medicine in 2006 and went on to specialize in anesthesiology. She completed her residency at St. Luke's Roosevelt Columbia Hospital and her fellowship at the New York School of Regional Anesthesia. In addition to practicing clinical anesthesiology, she is also the assistant director of the East Shore Ambulatory Surgical Center. In this episode, we will discuss her career success and her fulfilling work-life balance.
All right, Colleen. First of all, thank you so much for being with us today. I know you just had a baby. That's crazy.
Fun times.
So how many, again, a little personal, I'm sorry, but like how many days old is the baby?
The baby is 5 days old.
So the baby is 5, that you just gave birth 5 days and you're doing an interview for us. That's really cool.
Very cool. I'm very excited.
I appreciate it. So tell me, like, what are you doing? Like, did you get some time off I know you said you wanted to go back to work, but you got some time off for the baby. Like, how much time and what are you doing?
I did. My colleague and your friend Steve was teasing me that I can come back in 2 days, but I'm taking the full 12 weeks because I've learned in life that's time you'll never get back. And you could always work. And then I had some accrued vacation time, so I added that to that. So.
That's amazing.
Right. But I told them if I feel good, I'll come back and do administrative stuff. And they said to bring the baby. So it all works out.
That is very cool. Yeah, that's cool. You could bring your baby to work. You can't get better than that, right?
To an office, yeah.
All right. So tell me, like, imagine this, pretend this was like a regular day. Like, I don't know, let's make it like 12 months ago, or like before you were walking around with a baby. Like, you're an anesthesiologist. Tell me, and you know, as I understand, you run a surgery center. So tell me a little bit about what your responsibilities are, what your day might be like, what kind of cases you would do, like that type of thing.
So my responsibilities stem from a lot because our place is very new, even though this will be our 3rd year running. So I still probably do more than I should because everyone's still trying to get their feet wet. But from an anesthesia standpoint, I am what we call, quote unquote, the float person. So I'm usually out of the OR covering CRNAs, either 3 CRNAs to 4 CRNAs max.
And Colleen, I'm sorry to interrupt, but just for, you know, for our audience, some of them are students. So a CRNA is a nurse that actually works as an anesthesiologist, but needs to be supervised. Is that right?
In New York State, the rules are different across state lines, but in New York State, they need to be supervised by an anesthesiologist. So I'll cover them in the rooms. They start cases with me, call me for important stuff, and end cases with me if it's a general anesthetic with a breathing tube.
So what kind of cases are you supervising? Like,
what's amazing is how things have changed. Our center, for I think still to this day, is one of the only freestanding centers on Long Island that does total joints, which most medical students will learn at some point is a really big procedure. Years ago, even just in my residency, 10 plus years ago, patients would stay for 4 or 5 days in a hospital. So we do same day total joints, which is replacing people's total hips and total knees. We do pediatrics, healthy peds, not under the age of 2. We do tonsils and adenoids. We do a ton of plastics, but it's all breast reconstruction from breast cancer. And we do same-day lap choles, lap appies on healthy patients. And then our bread and butter is all orthopedic. So anything orthopedic. So, and then we base our patients on a certain guideline, the ASA classifications, which is classifying patients based on their comorbidities that have the ability to be at a freestanding center. So when I say freestanding is we're not attached to a hospital. So a lot of other hospitals on Long Island will do same day joints, but if there's a problem, they just wheel them over to the main OR, to the main hospital. But for us, we would, you know, it would be a whole different format.
Right. So your day is you're a float person, you're supervising, there's 3 ORs running at one time, you're supervising all these people. That sounds stressful. And then it sounds like on top of that, you do some administrative work also. Is that right?
Yeah, 5 beds. So even though I'm covering my CRNAs, my colleagues, if I have other attendings in the other rooms, I see all their patients as well. So at any point, I'm seeing 5 patients every 5 minutes at time.
Wow. That sounds stressful and hard.
It's busy, but I like being super organized, so it works. And then the administrative stuff is every patient that comes through our ASC, our Ambulatory Surgery Center, I screen every chart. So I make sure that all the paperwork is correct, that they have everything, that they're safe to be done at the center. And then when I have any questions, even though they've already been interviewed by a nurse practitioner in our pre-surgical testing, which is called PSTs, I still screen the charts again to make sure everything is safe to be done in an ambulatory center.
Sounds like a big job.
Fun. And then I do all the ordering and that stuff. It gets very detailed, but it's good. I like being busy.
All right. So tell me, start at the beginning. Where'd you go to college, Colleen?
So I actually went to Georgetown University down in Washington, D.C., which became an obsession of mine. My parents took me on a trip over Thanksgiving when I was 13 in 7th grade, and I got to walk the campus, and that's when I said, this is where I'm going.
Okay,
So,
and you're smiling, so I take it that you love Georgetown, right?
I loved it. I mean, I would pray that my kids can get in there at this point, but I had an amazing experience.
And did you know you wanted to go to medical school like right when you got there, or was that
I did.
process?
I'm one of 4, and all my siblings have no interest in medicine. My father is a physician. He's a urologist. He's an old school surgeon who is still practicing, taking call at 74.
Wow.
And when I was 5 years old, I have pictures in his office doing urine cultures on Petri dishes.
That's cool. That's really cool.
I always knew I wanted to do medicine, but I never put any thought into what type of medicine I wanted to do, which became a struggle when I was a 4th year.
So you told me, we spoke a little bit before we interviewed, and you told me that you had applied to some Caribbean schools. Is that right?
Correct. I probably applied, I can't even remember at this point. I think I saved all my rejection letters, probably to like 15, 20 medical schools. Georgetown I was waitlisted at, which I explained to you. And then my father's generation always talks about how it was the hardest year to get into medical school with Vietnam War. And a lot of his friends were foreign medical grads. So the stigma for me wasn't a big deal because all my parents' friends, most of them were foreign medical grads, learned second languages, went to Italy, Brussels, Mexico. So I ended up applying to Grenada and I got in. I was super excited about being in the Caribbean because I love warm weather.
So funny.
And then I just was holding on this wait list forever. And then last minute, 9/11 happened. My parents didn't want me leaving the country. There were other issues going on. And my dad, being in the medical field, said there's a school called NICOM on Long Island, which was literally down the street from where I grew up. And he said, you should apply there. And I said, no.
Right. That's horrible, right, for a podcast. But this is a true story.
But it's true. I wasn't educated on it. I didn't know anything about it. But the funniest thing is, and like we discussed, is it was probably the best experience of my life. And I wouldn't be where I am had I not been there and had those opportunities open up. And I had amazing group of friends and I had wonderful teachers.
So you got an acceptance letter, obviously, and then you started in school and you said you loved it, right? I mean, everything was great.
Yeah. I mean, I just felt like I met the warmest bunch of people that were all very smart, talented. And like I said to you, everyone had a reason and a story. And I think the biggest thing with all of the people, whether I've kept in touch with and haven't kept in touch with, but most of all my friends are very successful, is everyone had a passion for what they wanted to do. Everyone wanted to be there. It wasn't that, their parents thought they should become a doctor or so-and-so, or they were following some tradition. Everyone was passionate and getting to their end goal. And I think that made a difference in people's, drive to learn. And a lot of people that we met along the way, it was their second career. So they were even more focused.
Just, can you do you have a couple of people in mind? Like I have like my anatomy group that I was really close with and I could tell you what they did. Do you have like a group of friends and can you just tell me what they're doing?
One person in particular, Ardashir Reston had, he was my anatomy fellow. We called him Art. He was a brilliant guy. He would build computers on his own, like from the bottom up. He was very tech savvy. He became an anatomy fellow. Then he got into urology, which was very competitive. And then he basically created a program. I think it was at LIJ, was Dr. Smith, Bidlani Smith, who was a very well-known urologist at the time. He did a lot of research with him, and they ended up like creating an interventional urology fellowship for him. He's just a brilliant, smart guy, technically, great hands, great surgeon. And now he's moved around, but I think he's in Sinai now in the city. Just a really smart guy who did really well. And,
Awesome.
and he's a DO.
Awesome. So when did you decide you wanted to do anesthesia? What was so interesting to you about anesthesia? And then tell me about your application process to anesthesia residency.
Absolutely. So like I said earlier, I always knew I wanted to do medicine, but my parents, nobody really focused me on what I wanted to do. So I actually ended up being a fourth-year med student, just clueless. Like I had no idea. I liked everything. Except for peds and OB kind of. I liked peds. I just didn't like the parents.
Right. A lot of people feel that way.
I think I even told you I did a GI rotation at Lenox Hill with a great guy, and I loved procedures. I loved plastics, burn plastics at NUMIC, which is Nassau County, the University County Hospital here. They had a one spot where instead of doing 5 years of general surgery, you go straight into plastics. But part of me started realizing, like, that's one spot. Like, how, being a DO, how am I going to get that? All it takes is for someone to drop like 30 million and it's like one spot. I was like, I didn't think I could survive 5 years of general surgery because I never wanted to be a general surgeon if I didn't get into a specific fellowship. So my dad said, look into, of course, what you would expect for being a female and more of a lifestyle. He said, look into anesthesia, radiology, ophthalmology.
That's called the road to success. Have you heard that? Radiology, ophthalmology, anesthesiology, dermatology.
Right. So I ended up applying for a couple of anesthesia rotations, and a bunch of the phone calls that I got were, we don't take DOs. And I was sticking to the New York area. I didn't apply outside of New York. And the one in particular that I told you that stood out where I really wanted to try to do a rotation was at St. Luke's Roosevelt, which is now Mount Sinai West in the city. So
what year was that, Colleen?
So that was 2005.
Okay. And was anesthesia really competitive at that point?
Yes. I think when I applied, they take 12 per year, and they were saying they had over, 1,400 applicants. They were interviewing like 100, like something insane people.
Wow.
For 12 spots. I said, I called to set up a rotation, and the woman's first response, the secretary, was like, we don't take DOs, click, and hung up. And I was like, okay.
Now, were you stressed? Were you like upset? Were you crying?
No, I'm not a crier. No, I
would cry. I'm a crier. Yeah, I would cry.
It motivated me more. I was like, okay, which I thought was so funny. So 30 seconds later, nonetheless, I call back. I don't even wait. I don't disguise my voice. I just say, hey, this is Colleen. I'd love to speak with your chairman.
That's amazing. And what did he say?
So I just gave myself my pitch. I said, I'm a hard worker. I said, I love your program. I said, I love that, you guys are at the forefront of doing regional anesthesia, which I had read about, had some inclination of what it was. I said, I would really like to just shadow and learn. I understand you don't take DOs. And then he said, no problem. Nice guy. Proceeded to put me back on the phone with his secretary and set up a rotation.
That's awesome. And then you ended up doing your residency there?
Yes. So when I was there, the resident director, who now I'm very friendly with, John Wasnick, he point blank said to me one morning, he's like, we'll never take a DO here. And I was like, okay. And I don't know why I was so confident.
Right. That's great though.
That's
how you do it.
I just was like, okay. I mean, I still showed up. So I was the pain in the ass med student. I was the first person who got there every day and the last person who left. I learned how to do all the OR setups, like for the first year residents, like setting up their ORs. So I would set up all their ORs in the morning. I was a little crazy, but you realized you needed to stand out.
Right. And when it came time to apply to your residency, did you know, or did you have a good feeling that was going to work out?
So I finagled the system with, I can't remember how many electives you could take. Like one had to be surgical, one had to be whatever. I managed to have two or three of my electives be anesthesia, and we considered one of them like kind of a surgical. So I did a bunch of anesthesia rotations at Monty, Mimo, the old St. Vincent's downtown, and St. Luke's Roosevelt. Of those four places, St. Luke's Roosevelt was just way ahead of the game in terms of doing nerve blocks and regional anesthesia. So I made that my number one. And when I spent the month there, I think it was a month you get to spend, there was a first year anesthesia resident taking all this video footage. She was creating a little snap video to show the interviewees like a day in the life of an anesthesia resident at St. Luke's Roosevelt. So she's taking all this video footage, and I just said to her, I'm like, who's editing all this?
Right.
It's like hours of video footage, you know? So she goes, oh, I never really thought about that. So I said, give me the video, I'll edit it.
Awesome. That's awesome. So that's kind of the equivalent of the medical student, Tian Yu, who's helping me with this podcast.
Exactly.
This is like, maybe a message to him, keep working with Storch and maybe it'll turn into something one day.
Exactly.
So you get into St. Luke's, that's awesome, and you start your residency. Was there any issue being a DO? Were there any other DOs in the program at that point? Did you feel like different or?
I was the only DO in my class, but the year ahead of me, they ended up accepting one DO, Stacy Serbanitsky. She was 1 year ahead of me. So even though the program director said they would never take one, they took one a year ahead of me. So I was the second one in my program. But there were no issues. I mean, like my dad would always say, once you get started, once you're a good doctor, nobody asks you really where you went to school. I just kept kind of thinking about that. But once you were there, it was all about doing paperwork. And my residency program director would always say he loved having women in our program. He's like, because you guys always turn your paperwork on time. He's like, you don't dilly-dally, you pass your test, you don't need to be reminded, blah, blah, blah. So in my residency, for the 12 people, 10 of us were women.
Wow. Now, did you do fellowship after that?
So there was one spot for the fellowship offered at my program, which is why I made that my choice. It was called NYSORA, which stands for New York School of Regional Anesthesia. And my year became extremely competitive to get that one spot. So I had my eye set on it as a first year resident, always working with the regional attendings, doing extra work, research projects. And then my year, they had all these applicants more than ever. And I was like, great, I'm never going to get this. And they ended up taking 2 fellows that year.
That's awesome. That was a great experience too, I guess.
It was amazing. I mean, the best part about it is because every fellowship in this country for regional anesthesia is very different. A lot of programs, it's more based on teaching you how to do blocks because there's not a standardized program in all residencies where you learn X amount of nerve blocks. Like in some really litigious hospitals, they don't want nerve blocks because of other medical issues, things that medical students will learn about, compartment syndrome, lawsuits, etc., nerve injuries, which is all not an issue if you're a well-trained regional anesthesiologist. But my program was like, if you come to our program, it's not about learning how to do nerve blocks. We expect you know how to do them already. It's more about doing research and teaching. So that 1 year in my fellowship, we went to India, the Philippines, Rome.
Wow.
Everywhere.
That's cool.
Around the world to teach other doctors and residents, which was amazing.
So some personal questions, like, do you mind telling us like when you met your husband or, kind of when you got married and started having kids and how this all fit in with this amazing career plan that you had?
Absolutely. So I always say I was lucky enough to meet my husband because I was so busy and so dedicated. So when I was at St. Luke's Roosevelt as a med student, I met him out through a friend. And I remember telling him in an organized way, like, hey, I get to work at like 5:45, 6. I don't leave till 9, like trying to give him times. And he took it as like, this girl's blowing me off. But I was telling him like, these are my windows of like available time to go out to dinner or something. Right. So I met him my 4th year of med school. And by the time I took my step 3, he sent me flowers, and he's like,
Oh,
thank
wow.
God. He goes, thank God there's no more boards.
Oh, that's so funny. And he's not a doctor, I take it. What does he do?
He's a chef and a restaurant owner. And I think our first Valentine's Day together, I made him a t-shirt that said, he wears a white cap, I wear a white cap. He wears clogs, I wear clogs. He holds a knife, I hold a scalpel. He calls himself a chef, I call myself a doctor.
That's so funny.
But I don't think we ever wore it out, but it was just
People always ask about work-life balance, and you talked about that a little bit in your choice of specialty. I know you told me you were thinking about GI at one point. You mentioned that also, and decided maybe that wasn't for you because you wanted some work-life balance. Number one, do you feel like that influenced your decision? Number two, do you feel like you made the right decision? And how hard is it to have a family and be a physician? You have two jobs.
I think the big thing was, number one, and my advice always when I talk to people is pick something that you like and you're passionate about, and then make it work into your lifestyle or your career. I think the problem with some medical students and residents that I see along the way is they want to start off with the lifestyle as a resident. And to me, that doesn't work. I love that my residency program, that my chairman was so hardcore. He would not hire nurse anesthetists, which we explained are trained nurses that can administer anesthesia, in our residency program. So a lot of other programs would have residents get relieved at 3 p.m. by nurse anesthetists to go do studying, paperwork, go to the library. But a lot of them wouldn't do that. They'd just go home, work out, and not do work. I love that my program was so intense. My feeling was I wanted to learn as much in my 3 to 4 years, work as hard as I could, even if it was 120 hours a week, so that I felt comfortable when I came out. But I realized that in anesthesia, you do have the ability, and like some other fields, ER, to manipulate your hours. With that said, there's a sacrifice in pay, which I was okay with. My one teacher always taught me in my fellowship, if you're not happy on $100,000, you'll never be happy.
Right. I think that's good advice.
Yeah. And I really just felt like I put the time in. I explained to you that I saw the big picture and did a fellowship that nurse anesthetists are not trained in. So it separated me from them. And ironically, with the way healthcare is changing, regional anesthesia is really sought after because it provides patients sometimes with 24 hours of pain-free. So they're able to go home. With insurance companies are sending patients home sooner and sooner. So I really built a niche for myself. So after, I think, 10 years of taking call and 24 hours and 3 weekends, a month of working, I finally asked for a new position at my old job and said, I don't want to take call, and this is what I want to make, and this is the hours I want to have, and it worked out. I think you realize, and what I said is, you can't be the best researcher, the best anesthesiologist, the best mother. You can't have it all. You just need to figure out where you're willing to compromise. But you can't expect going in to start at that point. I think the big thing is you need to build your foundation first till you get to your end point, or as I say, your big picture.
I think that's great advice for everybody listening, whether it's a medical student or a resident, all the way through. Can you think of any piece of advice that you got, whether it was in college or medical school or doing residency fellowship, just general advice that you feel has really helped you that you would pass on to people listening to the podcast?
I think it's twofold. We spoke about the one thing when I was in high school, a teacher explained looking at the big picture and not being so, pigeonholed, looking, directly what you want now, but what you want 10 years from now was huge for me, which I think led me to getting a career and a specialty that really allowed me years down the line to not have all the hours and loads of work. And the other advice is really do something that you love and you're passionate about, because, at the end of the day, it's really, most people, you're not going into medicine for money. You do need a bottom line to pay back loans and to be practical. But at the same time, I love what I do, which is probably why having a 1-week-old baby, I could see myself going back to work just for 2 hours a day just to help out and keep things moving. I think finding something that you really enjoy and being able to look a few steps ahead is what I would say.
That's great. Now, did you take loans for school?
I did. Everyone's born into different situations. I was fortunate enough that my parents paid for college and I didn't have to have that burden. My parents did tell me, though, I would be responsible for my next level of education. So I had loans. I think my husband reminded me I graduated with 200 plus. My parents made me live at home. They're like, we're not paying for an apartment, and I didn't want to take out a loan. And my advice is any help you can get, as much as it's nice leaving college and to continue living on your own, you could suck it up and live at home or live on someone's couch or live on someone's
minimize your debt, right? Because you got to pay for it later. And was your husband was he a little freaked out when he's like, I love this girl. She's great. She made me a t-shirt, but now I'm getting married to $200,000 worth of debt.
Yeah, he was my sugar daddy for a long time. So yeah, he always makes jokes about how much debt I have. But, like you say, it's one of those things. You pay over time, you get low interest. If you pay a certain amount on time, your interest, it decreases your payments even a little bit more. But yeah, it's terrible how much, and I think it limits the amount of people who sometimes apply because it is so overwhelming to think about taking out that kind of money.
So a couple of general anesthesia questions. And again, of course, I'm a gastroenterologist, so I work with anesthesiologists a lot. My first question is, I've heard anesthesia is 99% boredom and 1%, oh my God, like stress. Do you think that describes anesthesia as a specialty? Is that something that makes you want to do it? There's a lot of stress when things aren't going perfectly right. Is that true?
Absolutely. I mean, sometimes I think we're not paid enough for what we do, stopping people's breathing and hoping you can place a tube at points. But I don't really even see it as that. I guess, sure, if things are going well, the exciting parts are the beginning and the end. But, the patients that I'm taking care of, I remind the residents and the nurse anesthetists, sometimes the sedation cases are the hardest cases because you're finagling someone who does not have a sustained airway. They're breathing on their own. You're trying to make them comfortable enough that they don't move, but not too much where they don't breathe. So I always say those are the most dangerous cases because then in the middle of it, they just decide to vomit. So, I think it can be described like that, but I just don't see my day like that.
Okay. All right. That's good. That's a misconception on my part. And another question, it's interesting to me as far as how students pick their specialties. I feel like for GI, for example, for a while it was very non-competitive and then it became very competitive. And I think all things kind of cycle. I feel like anesthesiology has been like that. I know when I was in medical school, it wasn't competitive. And then about the time that you applied, it was very competitive and maybe a little less so now. Do you have any advice on students as far as, and I know you mentioned, pick something you love, but the competitiveness coming out of a DO school as far as fellowship?
I mean, the way I look at it is, it's like Harvard. My dad used to say, you don't want to go there. He's like, you won't fit in there. He's like,
right.
You're not at that level. Like for me, I don't think it would have been realistic being a DO to say, hey, I want to do dermatology. Like, I just don't think, though there were, 2 kids from my class, but they were just functioning at another level of like research and, scores that I just wasn't going to get. So I think you have to be realistic with yourself. But the way I saw it when I finally started realizing what I wanted to do is, do you like doing certain procedures or do you like doing lots of medical management? And I love medicine because I love the storytelling of someone's medical history and problem solving and, trying to figure out what's wrong. But I realized that I loved a little bit hands-on, and I get that in anesthesia doing the nerve blocks, procedures that we get to do, but it's not obviously as involved as being a surgeon. So I think you also have to be realistic about what's going on at your time and what's competitive, because you also don't want to set yourself up for complete failure.
If you could go back in time, like obviously, your dad is an MD, you applied to Granada, you were all ready to go, and this 9/11 thing happened, and you kind of ended up at NICOM to stay in the US. Would you change anything? Do you think anything would have been different if you'd gone to an MD school?
I mean, I wonder what would have happened, but I would never change anything for the way things ended up. I mean, the experience I had in medical school was great. The people I met, I loved my residency program. They used to make fun of my class in particular. They're like, you guys are just too nice to each other. So if I was a first year and on call, I would set up all my friends' ORs, which was the rest of my class, their ORs in the morning, to give them like an extra 15 minutes to either sleep in, have a cup of coffee, or eat breakfast before they saw their patient. I think I just really lucked out with being around nice people who really wanted to learn. So I don't think I would have changed it. I mean, the fact that I don't think I would have ever gotten the fellowship or my residency had I not made that video. The video I ended up editing, of course, had my name edited by medical student Colleen McCally, and it was shown at grand rounds to everyone.
It's
so
amazing.
I don't, I wouldn't change it. I loved my program and my experience at NICOM.
That's great. All right, Colleen. I think that's all I have for you today.
Awesome.
As I told you, thank you so much.
Thank you for chatting with me.
This concludes our episode of Do or Do Not. Send all inquiries, comments, suggestions, and even let us know if there's someone you want us to interview to doordonotpodcast@gmail.com. Don't forget to like us on Facebook at Do or Do Not Podcast for updates. If you enjoyed our podcast, please share it with your classmates and administration. We have plenty of more interviews lined up, and we're excited to share them with you. This is Tianyu Shea, OMS 3. Thank you guys so much for listening to Do or Do Not.